If you've ever wondered whether God can turn your dreams into a reality, then my next conversation is for you. Joining me now is Stirling John, celebrated Ojibwe singer, songwriter, 6-time Country Music Alberta nominee, and a beloved officer in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Welcome to 100 Huntley Street, Stirling.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you here. Now, Stirling, today you are an active RCMP officer. You're a celebrated country musician. But going back to your upbringing, tell us a little bit about those early years of your life.
It all started when I was about 5 years old, singing in church, in Wingham Baptist Church. And I remember my mother really promoted that music passion for me.
Yeah.
Singing How Great Thou Art on the stage. And it really amplified my passion for the future, singing with my family in gospel jamborees in Ontario. It was a lot of fun. So that was really where the journey started. Yeah. Growing up in my teenage years, I wanted to perform on Canadian Idol, but I was too afraid, Yeah. And then other passions really creeped into my life, policing and wanting to become a pilot and a dog handler within policing. So there's a lot of different dreams that I had. Yeah. But that was all part of the story as to why I ended up coming back to music, and sometimes those passions had to be put on hold to realize certain things in life, experiences, heartbreak, traumas as well. So that's really what brought me back.
It's amazing, Stirling. Your life story is really incredible. And when I think back to your early years, you mentioned your mom and singing in the gospel jamborees, but your mom also was raising 3 kids on her own. And here you are growing up in a home where there isn't a father figure present. Those are challenges. But yet you become so goal-driven in your life and you have these goals. But what was that like for you as you were growing up and there wasn't a father present? What were some of the struggles that came out as a result of that?
I certainly did have some. There was mentors in my life that did come into my life. Robert Armstrong was one of those people. He was a pilot, and he really shaped a lot of our passions as boys. My brother Curtis became a pilot as a result, and through that passion, I was able to become a tactical flight officer on the police helicopter within the RCMP. So it's been incredible. But I think that it certainly affected me in certain ways. When I was growing up, I had a hard time saying, I love you. It was a really deep thing for me. Yeah. And I didn't really understand why. I used police dogs when I was raising police pups to get through that. Because I knew I had to challenge that for my kids. Yeah. It was important for me to say that, and my love language was providing. But it was probably one of the biggest struggles for me in my life that I had was overcoming that, and I did. Yeah. But I think that was truly something that affected me as a child, not necessarily having that proper father figure in my life. That's what I really recall the most about that. Yeah. It's
amazing, though, you're talking about different mentors coming into your life and this awareness you had that, this sense of love maybe that you needed, that you felt, you needed to express or however that was showing up. It's very insightful. Your career as an RCMP officer began when you were 19. You got into training for it. And it's, been an incredible career. You've referenced some of the stuff you've done, like being a pilot and working with police dogs and all those different things, doing search and rescue. I know you've done that. And as you were going into that field and you continued to build in that career, you began to experience different things that caused a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. How did that PTSD show up in your day-to-day? And what made you realize what you were going through?
Policing certainly exposed me to many different things that affected me in ways in a terrible way. There were several gun calls that affected me back in 2014. or, many situations that unfold, whether you're dealing with suicides within our communities, and those really affect you, or dealing with children who have been assaulted or their lives taken. It affects you. I recall there was a time before Christmas in 2019, and it was an individual who had been compressed in a vehicle. And I remember, as a police officer on that scene, I couldn't really do much until the fire department cut the vehicle apart. And I remember her hand being out of the vehicle, and she was still very alert, right? And I remember just holding her hand before Christmas, right? It was one of those things where I realized that is why we were in that position at that point in time, because that lady needed that, right? Yeah. And there's times within policing where you were exposed to homelessness. You're exposed to people that are at their rock bottom.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, you can pray with those people too, on the side of the road. And we've done that. It's the things that aren't seen. And I know other officers that have done the same thing. There's many.
Yeah.
Right? We're in this for a reason. When I was younger, I gave my life to be a missionary. I didn't really realize what that meant.
Yeah.
Right? It was in Oklahoma City. We were on a youth trip down to Oklahoma City.
That's so cool.
And I remember going to the altar and giving my life to be a missionary. But I realized that story is unfolding in my life through policing, through music as well.
Yeah.
And policing has been an incredible way to affect change in people's lives, within our youth, within our communities. And we don't know the extent of how we affect somebody's life. Mm-hmm. People realize and remember that time when they got a traffic ticket. I do. I remember when I was younger and I got a speeding ticket. But when you take the time to go to that domestic violence call and you talk to that child of the parents that are fighting for 45 minutes to an hour after, and you just lift them up and give them words of encouragement, that's what means everything. There was a song that was written after a shift called For You, and that was one of those stories. Yeah. And, that became a bigger thing for Nova Scotia when there was a massacre that happened. That song became a dedication to Nova Scotia. Yeah. And we don't realize the reason necessarily why we're put in certain situations at that moment in time, but there's a bigger purpose for everything.
Stirling, so incredible. A lot of your songs that I've been listening to do speak to the experiences of first responders, and they shed light on the reality of what you guys go through. And it makes me so thankful that you are out there and just meeting the needs of people in society. And, you talked about giving your life as a missionary, and that is exactly what God's using you to do right now through this work and your music. But, you've had many encounters with God, and as you've experienced some of these hardships, and I know you went through a divorce, you had another encounter with God. Tell me a little bit about that experience that happened to you.
It was probably the totality of circumstances in my life, between dealing with trauma within work. There were several gun calls that happened over the course of about 3 years. Yeah. And dealing with a divorce on top of that, and not feeling that I had somebody to speak to about what I was dealing with and debrief. Yeah. That's a big deal, right? So it became a very helpless feeling for me at that time in my life. I remember going to church, sitting at the back of the Spruce Grove Alliance Church, and nearly in tears, just wanting normalcy back, my family, right? But that was part of the healing process that needed to happen. I had to go through that time in my life. The amazing thing is, that's when songwriting started to happen. That's when meeting the right people within the music industry started to happen. And there was a song that I had written years ago called This I Know. And the cool thing is, this is an amazing story. It was an afternoon when I was having a tough day. It was raining out. I was in the police car. I was patrolling the back sandhills of Enoch Reserve. I drove down the road and I found some garbage in the middle of the trail. There was a book that was open on the trail. So in the song it says, the weather's changed and so did we. Could we just go back to the way it used to be? Right? This book that was opened had 2 lines on it, printed. And it says, what if the weather changes and we don't?
Oh, wow.
I took that and I framed it.
Wow.
And then I finished co-writing the song with Dalia Wakefield and Rob Hughes.
Wow. And that's like, just God stepping in and saying, I'm giving you this message.
Yeah.
Right? It's time just to change. Things have changed, so grow with me.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's
wow.
been one thing after another. I've met people within the music scene that have brought me so far, and I've had to let go.
Yeah.
It has opened other doors in my life to the band that I have now. Dave Peterson, Andrew Bagaria, Jason, Lyle, and Cameron. We have an amazing group of people that they're certainly in line with my values.
Yeah.
And they have supported me 110% along the way. And I realized that the hurts over the last 10 years have really helped me grow. We don't get there alone. God has a big plan for the future.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be presented within building a foundation, Stirling John Foundation for Youth Empowerment.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to really utilize that to make change within our youth's lives, within reserve communities that don't have necessarily the proper programs that really can enhance the arts. And we can be part of that mentorship and leadership story for them too.
That's incredible, Stirling. And as you said, God has a big purpose for people's lives. Sometimes they have to, be able to see that. It's a hard thing to realize, but that God has a big purpose for your life. I'm so thankful for the music that's coming out. We're going to be hearing some of it on 100 Huntley Street. For those young people watching right now who might be saying, there are so many roadblocks in front of me. How can God change my life? What would you say to them?
Stay true to yourself and your foundation, because I can say for myself, sometimes we take detours in our life, but as long as we have a firm foundation in God, He has us, and the reality is, I believe that intuition is of God. I look at the music scene. It's a very saturated industry. I don't want to do music to get famous. I want to do music because it's the right thing to do. And it can be a great way to bridge the gap between police and our communities, because we need that.
Yes.
And God has that plan for me in my life. And no matter what, He's going to make whatever is meant to happen.
Well, Stirling, you are such an inspiration, and we are so thankful for the work you do as part of the RCMP. I'm so thankful for the music that you're creating that honors God and brings people together and promotes healing. Stirling, I'm so thankful for your story and that you were with us today.
Thank you for having me.